You may have seen the news last week that Cloudflare won their patent litigation case against a patent troll, but maybe you're not from the world of patents, patent litigation, or kind of what this looks like in tech. So I'm going to share my screen and let's just talk through this real fast. We're looking at the Cloudflare blog. First, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Cloudflare blog is truly a wealth of information. It's been a staple resource for me the last decade or so. Their engineering team posts a lot about the challenges they faced, how they overcame them, what design decisions they made. And this write up by their legal team is really awesome too. So I'll link to it. But I encourage you just to read more things in their blog if you haven't already. There are a ton of golden nuggets in there. Okay, we're going to talk about what patent trolls are, how patent litigation usually works, and why we should care. If you're not from this world, this is just going to be a super simple overview that kind of puts a little bit of context around this announcement from Cloudflare and hopefully helps you wrap your head around why this should matter to you. First, their blog post title says Patent Troll Sable pays up, dedicates all its patents to the public. First, what is a patent troll? In the world of patent litigation, there is a term called non-practicing entity, which you'll often see abbreviated as NPE. Patent troll is a colloquial way to refer to an NPE who is in the business of suing other companies. They make their money by opening patent litigation cases against other companies and kind of hoping for these settlements where they come out ahead. That's usually what we call a patent troll. There are other types of non-practicing entities. There are folks that rightly own their intellectual property and license it out to others. The licensing conversation is different than this one. Patent trolls, that term is usually used to refer to companies who are in the business of litigation in particular. Sable sued Cloudflare back in 2021. How does patent litigation usually work and what are kind of the steps here? So the overview of patent litigation is a company who owns some intellectual property will see another company who they think is building and selling intellectual property that they own. So when you own a patent, other companies are not supposed to kind of build and sell that innovation without your permission. And if they do, that's called infringement. Patent litigation cases are often started by one company accusing another of infringement. And that's what happened here. Sable owned some patents and accused Cloudflare of infringing on their patents. So this blog post goes a little bit more into depth on the patents that Sable asserted and where they came from. It sounds like they used to belong to a company called Caspian Networks, which went out of business about 20 years ago. So the patents are a little bit on the old side. This says Sable initially asserted around 100 claims from 4 different patents against Cloudflare. These litigations can involve multiple patents. Often they are patents that are related and they're being asserted against a company and the family of products that they sell. Now, the 100 claims piece, if you come to Google Patents, which is just patents.google.com, it's kind of fun to like click around on if you haven't already. You can search by inventor, you can search by assignee, which usually is the name of a company. How this works when you get a patent is there are individual, like human inventors, and then they assign the intellectual property to their company. This is a clause in most employment agreements, so you may have seen that before. But just as an example, we can come click on one of these patents. This one belongs to Cloudflare. These patent pages have kind of some high level descriptions. They have background information. All of this text on the left here is called the specification. And then the text on the right here are called the claims. So the claims have to cover the entirety of the innovation. They often start with a method or a system. In a proxy server for providing internet-based proxy services, the method comprising. So this is called the preamble of the first claim. And then each of these sections here are actually called limitations. And then if we scroll down, we can see here is a second claim. This one is kind of in gray font and underneath claim one because you can see that it starts with the method of claim one further comprising. That means that the limitations in claim two are dependent on claim one. Claim one is called an independent claim. In this case, claim two is a dependent claim. So when litigation is opened, the company who is accusing infringement has to say exactly which of the list of claims they believe the other company is infringing on or implementing or selling, for example. And this one is just an example one. This is not the patent related to the case, but it gives you an idea of kind of the depth that they have to believe that the company is infringing and ultimately prove. They have to prove every single one of the lines of each claim that is asserted. Cloudflare says that Sable initially asserted 100 claims from 4 different patents, accusing multiple Cloudflare products and features of infringement. Like I mentioned, that is pretty typical. Multiple products and multiple patents can be involved in the same case. The rest of the case, after the first company accuses the second company of infringement, the rest of the case is really spent where the plaintiff is trying to prove that the other company did infringe on their patents, and the defendant is trying to prove, no, actually, we didn't. How do they do this? Both sides end up with a strong legal team that hires technical experts as well. So if we scroll down a little bit here, we can see Cloudflare actually says, to do this, we enlisted the help of one of our talented Cloudflare engineers, as well as a professor from Washington University who's an expert in this field. This is very typical in these cases. Sable likely hired their own technical experts as well. The reason for this is these patents are very technical, right? If we come back over to this one, you can see some of the language in here, receiving at the proxy server from a second one of a plurality of client devices, a request for an action to be performed on the identified network resource of the origin server. So probably the average judge or jury member is not an expert in proxy servers or networking or how client devices connect to these things. How this is actually handled in patent litigation is experts are hired to analyze the patent claims, analyze the technology, assess, okay, does this actually infringe, does it not? And then explain that to the judge and the jury in the case. In Cloudflare's case, they used one of their internal engineers, which is awesome, and then an external expert. One of the pieces of collateral that is built over the course of patent litigation is called a claim chart. This is a pretty simple version of one, but it's good for like example purposes. What claim charts do is they outline each claim. So we just saw this would be the preamble of claim 25. This is one of the limitations, and there's all these limitations. And the teams have to show exactly how the company they're accusing meets the claim language. And in patent litigation, it's actually required to meet basically every single word in the language. So for example, you can see that Cloudflare has crossed out like a single word here. And thus they have an X saying like, we actually don't infringe on this because we might do some of these other things, but we don't do it with these words. The important takeaway here is that these litigation cases require that the product being accused meets every single one of the accused claims and all of the language within that claim. There can't be gaps. It has to map. There has to be one-to-one mapping for every single thing in this language. That's actually extremely, extremely important and a good takeaway. We can see one more example of this as we scroll down. So Cloudflare outlines some of the technical reasons that their argument stood on. Here they're saying they route packets, not microflows. So that's kind of interesting to read about if you want. And then this one I think is another really good example. Claim 25 requires steps at line cards. And they're saying we don't actually do this at a line card. You can read more about their argument here, but I think the way that they illustrated this and explained it is a really good example of how every single word in these claims and in the claim language matters, and a single case can be won or lost by a single word. Really, really, really important. Another step that can happen in patent litigation is one party can try to argue that the patents or the innovations claimed in a patent are actually invalid. So as we scroll down, we see this validity ruling. We have the infringement accusations. Infringement is one of the first steps and a good term to know. And then you have validity or invalidity. That's another good term to know in the world of patent litigation. Basically, the idea is the party will argue, actually, this patent was not valid in the first place, and therefore we can't be infringing on it because it shouldn't be a patent. In order for patents to be granted, they have to meet a few requirements. So first, they have to be novel, so a new innovative idea. They have to be non-obvious to someone who knows the domain of the patent. They have to be implementable, so they can't be impossible. And then the specification has to have enough detail that someone else could implement it. So there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to focus on this idea of novel and non-obvious. This is usually what teams try to kind of build arguments around in their invalidity case. They will try to say, oh, actually, this wasn't novel, or it would have been obvious to someone working in this domain at the time. And then they'll prove it basically with a bunch of background information. Often this will be maybe blog posts or academic papers that outline an idea very similar or could be combined with something else that's well known in the industry to come to an idea that was actually not obvious. That's the main idea behind invalidity arguments. And this is just another step that you'll see often in a lot of litigation. And again, when you like thinking back to how does this actually matter in my life, right? If you are trying to file for a patent for something that you build and own an idea of yours, it's really important to make sure that your patent application, specification, everything shows that you meet these four criteria because you don't want to, have your patent invalidated somewhere down the line. And then the outcome of this case was that Sable's patents got dedicated to the public, so they're now in the public domain, and Cloudflare won, which is a great outcome. Why do we need to care about this if we're kind of not from that patent litigation world and trying to figure out, why is this important? The first thing I want to say is that it's important to have a good intellectual property team. There are a lot of rules about what can and can't be patented, and just coming up with good patent language that covers your innovations and your inventions and the products that you build and sell is worth its weight in gold. Just super, super important. If you don't own patents, it's good to just be aware of the domains that you operate in, maybe some of the other big players and what intellectual property they might own. Just have a little bit of context on this space. Patent trolls often go after these big companies because remember, trolls are the ones that are in the business of litigation. They want these big settlements. That's how they make money. But this doesn't preclude them from going after small companies too. And litigation can be super costly. It's really costly for big companies, but the big companies usually just have enough money to pay for it and kind of eat that cost. Small companies don't. There are unfortunately examples of small companies that have been completely put out of business, had to stop operating because these cases were just so costly to defend against. So this is why it should matter to you, even if you don't come from this world. This overview is a super simplified version, but hopefully you found it helpful and informative. there are a lot of intricacies in this world, just like any other world, but it's good to just kind of be aware of what's going on. So thanks for watching.